Hello everybody. I did my presentation on constructivist learning environments in the early childhood education setting. Throughout the presentation, the constructivist learning environments will be abbreviated CLE, and early childhood education is done through ECE. This idea came to me when we were reading the Hannafin articles on the dimensions of learning environment. And as we read about the scope and the user and the educational activity and all that, it brought me back to what I had studied in college about having the environment match the being age appropriate for children and how children learn best and all that. So I wanted to dive into it more. And the reasons particularly were in kindergarten, what I've been teaching, the learning environment is more like an older age level where kids are expected to sit at tables and on the carpet. One of the research articles I read said up to 90% of school time is whole group time where kids are expected to sit there and listen. They're more passive in the learning instead of the active, which is one thing that's very big in early childhood education, is students being actively engaged and participating in their own learning. So I wanted to dive into that. And early childhood education is based off of Piaget and Vygotsky's theories, saying that they need to be active, that they need support within their instructional level in order to boost them up into the next level and then continue to support them at that level and throughout. They construct knowledge by being able to manipulate. So if somebody goes into an early childhood education, and it makes me go back to like a Head Start or the child care centers that have that educational focus, and not kindergarten now, as we see it's been becoming more of a 1st through 12th grade setting, is it looks like the children are playing, and oftentimes parents will come and ask you, why are my children playing all day? They need to get an education. They're learning through playing, they're learning through experiences. So throughout the literature review, I had 3 main purposes, and it was to examine curriculum development in ECE that would be able to match a constructivist learning environment, to examine the dimensions of a constructivist learning environment, and to explore technology integration in a constructivist learning environment that had an ECE perspective. So throughout the semester we've talked about what it means to be constructivist, and through here, and I've put some citations, being actively participating, creating knowledge through their own experiences, being able to explore. And the one philosopher that it all kind of goes back to is Giambastico, not quite sure how to say his name, but he's from the 18th century. And he was the first one to propose the idea that the way to know something is to experience it. From him, we have the more main contemporary ones that we're more familiar with, which are Dewey, Piaget, and Montessori. And Dewey, we know, also talked about, he liked the active engagement, and he talked about self-directed learning. Then there's Piaget, who had the 4 stages of development, I don't want to get them wrong, sensory, pre-operational, con-pre-operational, and formal operational. And in an early childhood setting, depending on where you're at, because it's from birth through age 8, it's normally either the sensory motor or the pre-operational. But as I kind of briefly touched upon, our learning environments are now no longer targeted towards those 2 stages. It's more of the concrete operationals and not fitting how our young children learn. After Piaget, another one is Montessori, and you might recognize her name because of the Montessori schools, which are based off of her beliefs on how young children learn, which are through self-direction, independence, being able to solve their own problems within whatever content knowledge there is, and then being able to explore the content through centers with guidance from teachers. So teachers aren't telling the children where to go and what ways to experience or explore. They're just providing materials, encouraging them to gain that knowledge, and so forth. According to Dewey, Piaget, and Montessori, they talked about the 4 elements in a constructivist learning environment, which are the instructional emphasis, the classroom activities, instructor roles, and student roles. So the instructional emphasis is the students are active in their own learning. They are able to collaborate with one another, and they construct their knowledge in student-centered activities that are authentic learning experiences, meaning they kind of have the real-world experiences. If you walk into an early childhood education, you might see the home center, housekeeping center, whatever. I don't remember the exact terms we called it, because they're learning how to do stuff in a typical environment, like measuring while they cook or so forth. The classroom activities are all based to provide students multiple opportunities to experience the same content skills. So the content for 1 week, you're going to experience it in a math center, in a science center, in the housekeeping center, in the block center, in the writing center. It's all based around the same skills so that the students can learn through their specific learning preferences and experience in multiple ways, which helps the students being able to gain a deeper understanding of that knowledge and then transfer it to a new situation. The instructor roles in a CLE are to provide support as the students are learning, and also to make sure that the resources are available and relate to the theme of the week, or will help the students understand that content. And the student roles, as you may guess, are just to be active and to gain that knowledge. And then we dive into Hannah Finn's dimensions in a CLE, which I touched upon as to what brought me into this final project. And we have the scope, which is either the macro or the micro level environment. So the macro, you learn the content broadly, where the micro, you learn the content in depth. The user activity, you can either generate your knowledge, create your own knowledge, or the mathemagenic environment, where you learn content in multiple ways, which I kind of touched upon. Out through centers, you can learn the multiple skill, one skill in multiple areas throughout the day. Educational activity, you're either goal directed, you know the goal you're trying to reach by the end of the year, or through the exploratory, which is you're more concerned about the process and learning how to reach that goal. Content integration can either be cross content or within content. So the cross content, the content is taught within a variety of different subjects, where the within content you learn about the same skill in one content but with multiple different perspectives. One important element that I read about that really was specifically honed in on a CLE and ECE was culture. So there's 3 types. So you have the caring, which is to help the children learn self-efficacy, racial identity, and cultural identity, and you do this through just giving them support and recognition and allowing them to collaborate with each other. And then you have the culture of competence, helping the children become productive and successful members in their class and then in the future society through learning self-regulation and independence. And then you have the culture of excellence, where you encourage the higher order thinking skills and it empowers students to be successful. And this brought me back to ECE specifically because ECE is all about teaching the whole child. It's a holistic approach, and we can't take away these steps within in an early childhood education, and in my opinion too, in any type of grade. The kids need to know that they're being cared for while they're at school. Then we have curriculum development. So taking everything that we talked about in a constructivist learning environment, specifically geared towards an early childhood education setting, we want to develop a curriculum development based on these goals. So if you're going to evaluate a curriculum or adopt a curriculum, you need to make sure that they have the goals of being able to create a knowledge base of content areas. They develop language skills for young children. They teach them how to self-regulate themselves, social skills, and problem-solving skills. Also, there's 8 indicators that the National Association for Education of Young Children deem appropriate. So also when you are evaluating a curriculum, you also need to keep these 8 indicators in mind because they're specifically geared towards how young children learn. And we've touched on all of them as well. They're active engaged throughout every lesson. The goals are clear and communicated to all stakeholders, meaning the teacher, the admin, the parents, any other support throughout the building. The curriculum is evidence-based. It involves exploration, play, and intentional teaching. Intentional teaching means it's purposely planned towards students' interest. It builds on students' prior knowledge. It's comprehensive, and the standards validate the content, and it benefits the students, all students. And then we also have the teaching approaches in a constructivist learning environment that are specific towards early childhood education. So we have the traditional structured approach, which means that it's all specifically teacher directed, and this would kind of come back to where the students are sitting on carpet for up to 90% of the time of the day. Then you have the play-based approach, which the students are able to freely explore, but there are constraints from the teacher, meaning time, different resources, if they're allowed to freely go to any center they want, or if it's told which center you're going to for the day. If it's developmentally appropriate practice, which means this one reflects the culture beliefs of the teacher. Multi-age grouping, mixed age levels, and then the Reggio-inspired approach is where students are able to freely explore and learn through multiple levels and learning modalities, and it's very closely aligned with the Montessori approach. I put up a couple of early childhood education curriculums that I found. The Science Start curriculum is based off of Piaget and Vygotsky's beliefs. And the goal is right here, and it's very specific towards all early childhood education goals and the beliefs on how young children learn. I was kind of surprised because I've never heard of this one, which also makes me kind of wonder why people are getting away from the science or so forth. But every single lesson starts with a science topic because they believe in this curriculum that kids are already intrinsically motivated by science. They want to learn about the world. So they start with science and then they kind of branch off into the other content areas. And then I also found the Head Start framework one, which I was not surprised about, obviously, because Head Start is everywhere in the country with the goal of getting students ready for kindergarten through 11 different domains that include the whole child, teaching to the whole child. As I went through this, I saw that there were some missing information from the research articles that I think would have benefited my understanding of how to develop a constructivist learning environment, specifically to early childhood education, in case I ever go back to classroom. One was, it didn't really touch on the learning environments in what we see now as the traditional way that schooling is taught, sitting for long periods of time. I could kind of guess off of Hanafin's 4 dimensions, but I feel like if it was more concrete stated, it would have been more beneficial. I also would have liked a little bit more elaboration on his dimensions. It was only in like 4 or 5 pages of his journal article that is in the classic writing piece. And the data on ECE curriculums is non-existent, and I feel like if schools or North Avenue, Baltimore City, have that information, they might be more inclined to go back to a constructive learning environment for early childhood education, but they don't record that data to show that this way of learning based on how students are developing works better than the traditional teacher-directed, let me tell you how to learn and what to think type of thing. And they said that there should be guidelines for how technology should be integrated into a learning environment, but it didn't tell the guidelines, and that was really frustrating. If you're going to make a statement, like, you should kind of back it up with what those guidelines are. Then I did find a couple of articles on how to integrate technology and the benefits of it. So it provides access to new ways to explore concepts. It helps the children think in a more creative process and to problem solve. The mathematical development talks specifically for early childhood education about shapes and how they could explore shapes and how to match them up and put them together to form different shapes. The language development was on letter recognition, sound recognition, and it's done through a lot of the songs online, and they talked about how the children like the way that it's developed through pictures and all that kind of stuff. The social development, I was originally thinking, well, kids are sitting there by themselves at a computer with headphones on, they're not getting socially developed, but they talked about kids being able to help each other. And I have seen this where a kid does not know where to go on one of the websites, another kid jumps up and goes and helps them. They can talk about their experiences on the computer, and then some schools don't have enough computers, so they'll put 2 or 3 together on a computer, and it's talking about collaboration and like learning how to share the time. Physical development, so it helps with the eye-hand coordination, which is a great benefit because when we do our testing at the beginning of the year with the kindergartners and they're trying to maneuver the mouse, it takes forever in a day to get them finished with a test because they're not used to that fine motor skill type of thing. But they did talk about how it obviously does not develop the large motor skills. So it was made, oops, I don't know how to get that off. It was made known to make sure that if you do integrate computers, to make sure you still have some large motor development areas in your classroom. And that is it. Thanks for a great semester.